I'm of the belief that it's always a good day when we can go out there and talk about some comments made by Pittsburgh sports talk radio host Mark Madden. I feel like Mark Madden should be one of the legendary names that gets tossed up in there when it comes to just the profession of sports talk radio as a whole. And if you are on the younger side, I do have some viewers of this YouTube channel that are under the age of 18, maybe they're getting into hockey as a preteen or a regular teen. If you're not familiar with who Mark Madden is, he is perhaps one of the most opinionated and maybe iconic is the wrong word to use, but he's one of the more notable names in the Pittsburgh sports talk scene. Mark Madden has himself a show, and you could go out there, listen to it on the X at 105.9 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But when it comes to a recent comment made by Mark Madden, the king of Pittsburgh sports talk, he went out there and spoke recently about a trade idea that links one of the better Pittsburgh Penguins legends to the Montreal Canadiens. To help us out with this discussion, we're going over onto thehockeywriters.com because Jim Parsons from yesterday went out there and wrote about some NHL rumors regarding the Red Wings, Flames, Canadiens, and Bruins. This article will be linked in the description, and it goes out there and talks about what Mark Madden went out there and spoke about the other day. According to NHL insider Mark Madden of 105.9 The X and Trib Live, the Pittsburgh Penguins had discussions about trading veteran defenseman Kris Letang to the Montreal Canadiens. Letang, who is entering the third year of his $36.6 million contract, has been a cornerstone of the Penguins' defense for, almost 2 decades? However, after the Pittsburgh Penguins missed the playoffs last season and are potentially on the outside of the playoff picture and looking in, Letang reportedly expressed interest in joining the Canadiens, his hometown team. Madden revealed that there were talks between the Penguins and the Habs regarding a potential trade, but nothing materialized. It's not clear why the trade never went down, but the Canadiens chose not to make significant moves this offseason, instead focusing on securing their young talent, including Cayden, Juraj Slafkovsky, and Arber Xhekaj, with multiple-year deals. Kris Letang remains in Pittsburgh, but it will be intriguing to see if there is more talk of a trade to Montreal if the Penguins have a rough go of things in 24-25. Now that is an absolute bombshell of an idea, tossed out there by one of the guys who is most notably in the spotlight of Pittsburgh sports talk's scene. Mark Madden, of course, is no random dude, so I do think it is interesting to bring up an idea that he talks about on his radio show, but to hear that Pittsburgh Penguins defenseman Kris Letang reportedly expressed a desire to get traded to Montreal in this offseason? Oh boy, the narratives just write themselves, don't they? Letang is 37 years old, 6 feet 201, right-handed guy from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, signed on till the end of 27-28, making $6.1 million a year. Letang, at one point in his career, was a Norris-caliber defenseman. He never won the award, but he was nominated for it once in his career. Letang was never really like a peak NHL guy, but he was always a good enough NHL guy to be considered amongst the top defensemen in the league conversation. The year in which he was nominated for the Norris was his only point-per-game campaign, scoring 38 points in 35 games in the shortened post-lockout year. Since then, he had had multiple 60-point seasons, including a 68-point in 78-game campaign in 21-22. This most previous season, Letang had 51 points in 82 games played. You could understand that with the arrival of Erik Karlsson in Pittsburgh, the number one power play situation ended up switching itself around a little bit. Kris Letang was always known as the number one guy, right-handed, offensively capable, quarterbacking that unit with Macklin and Crosby. But the arrival of Erik Karlsson kind of shook things up, and if a guy like Kris Letang is saying, hey, we're not really a winning team, quote-unquote, anymore. Sure, we're trying to be because Crosby and Macklin are still here. We can't just up and away rebuild with those guys on the roster. I'm interested in going over to a team that I just want to play for. I want to be the number one guy. I want to be on a team that I have emotional attachment to. And here in Pittsburgh, Erik Karlsson can pretty much do what I'm doing and do it full time, because having two guys offensively capable sharing the spotlight isn't really something that's guaranteed to working. I mean, look, Erik Karlsson playing with Brent Burns, very same situation. Both of those guys were stepping on each other's toes and they weren't able to do their thing to the best of their abilities. Guess what? Brent Burns gets traded away, Erik Karlsson scores 100 points, he wins the Norris. Fantastic. Kris Letang, while I'm not saying that he's going to be a 100-point defenseman if he goes to another team, it's just, he's so old and he's in this position now where making $6.1 million a year on a Pittsburgh Penguins team that may or may not be heading towards rebuild territory in a few years, you could understand if there was some sort of okay, maybe we should start thinking about my future here conversation inside Kris Letang's head. And especially for a guy like Mark Madden, of all people, to pick this up and talk about it on the radio, I don't want to completely dismiss this idea. So for Montreal, I wanted to get into this discussion here too. If Kris Letang expressed a very genuine desire to get traded to the Habs, and if Kent Hughes entertained that idea, acquired this guy, and added him on to the Montreal Canadiens for 2024 until 2028, it would be such an interesting fit. I mean, all of a sudden, I'd start to think that Mike Matheson's name gets a lot more noted as a potential trade chip, mostly because when you think about what Matheson is with Montreal, he is that number one power play quarterback, he is the main offensively capable defenseman. If Kris Letang comes over, then all of a sudden you have that same situation. Hey, they're stepping on each other's toes, they're not allowing each other to be a full-time number one power play guy, thus subjecting the team to broken chemistry. If there's a Matheson for Letang kind of trade, I honestly think that's not too imbalanced because of what Mike Matheson has become over the years. I think he's honestly kind of underrated compared to what he was before. I get it that Matheson was acquired by Montreal from Pittsburgh, so it is kind of hilarious to think about the idea of him getting traded over in a Letang trade, but if you have a Matheson-Karlsson pairing in Pittsburgh, that makes a lot more sense to me than having Karlsson on one pairing and then Letang on another. Also, you would have to consider what Letang's presence would be on the Canadiens' blue line, because it would be limiting some of the offensive opportunities for the other younger right-handed defensemen on the squad. In particular, you've got Justin Barron, you've got Logan Mailloux, and then of course, long-term, you're going to have David Reinbacher slotting into significant right-handed spots on the defense core. So having Letang on till 2028 is really going to make things difficult when it comes to dislodging that top D-man and giving the other younger guys better chances in the lineup. If Letang ages gracefully into his $6.1 million AAV contract, then okay, it's fine. But if he ends up, let's say, falling off a cliff, talent-wise, by the time 2026 rolls around, it's 2026 and he's 39 years old, he's still making 6.1 mil, and let's say Letang regresses to a 20-point defenseman in the NHL every year. Not saying it's guaranteed to happening, I'm just saying it's possible. I mean, the guy's 37 right now, right? If that happens, all of a sudden it's a lot more invaluable to have a guy like that playing on your third pairing, behind Barron, behind Mailloux, maybe behind Reinbacher even. I'm not saying that Kris Letang is guaranteed to absolutely stinking in a few years, but you have to start wondering about the possibilities when a guy's 37 years old. I'll acknowledge that if there's anybody that goes out there and potentially holds up and continues playing to a high level until he's 40, 41 years old, it's probably Kris Letang, but at the same time, it's going to have some significant hindrances to the other defensemen that are younger and potentially more fit long-term to help the Canadiens with their goals of potentially making the playoffs and contending every year, which won't be attained until, let's say, Kris Letang's contract is already expired. So, in the short term, you could say that a move like Kris Letang to Montreal would definitely help out the team, especially if you find a way to be able to keep Mike Matheson in some sort of a trade like that. But at the same time, you have to wonder, is holding on to Kris Letang till 2028 something that would actually help out the team in that time frame? Not in the 24-25 season, but in 2027-2028. By the time 2028 begins, will the Canadiens sacrifice the roster spots for some of these other younger guys to help that go through? Or do you just trade away one of those younger guys in the Letang trade? Let's say it's Logan Mailloux and an extra pick for Kris Letang. Pittsburgh gets a prospect that they want, Pittsburgh gets some extra draft capital because they kind of need that, and they listen to a request made by an apparently indifferent Kris Letang, who, according to Mark Madden on Pittsburgh Sport Talk Radio, went out there and requested a trade specifically to Montreal. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about this idea. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.